And in one of the photos that we have, it shows the Saudi king, and he looks like he's about to die. He's in so much pain at what's going on here. They just handed over the keys to Saudi Arabia to Donald J. Trump. So what is important to note is that where Trump went next, he went with Saudi as part of his team. So you need to understand, it's not just that he didn't go there and take them down and that they're never going to do it. No, they're now working for him. They're part of this team. They're part of the Q plan now. You need to wrap your heads around this.
Direct from Riyadh, President Trump took the first official flight.
And then the days that followed, Trump left Saudi Arabia and went immediately to Israel.
Defeating terrorism and creating a future of harmony, prosperity, and peace. But we can only get there working together. There is no other way.
Mr. Trump has already disappointed many Israelis. He promised to move the US embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem, his next stop. However, all the signs are that won't happen now.
One thing, in fact, we can just see there, just let me stop by saying we see President Trump there wearing a skull cap, a kippah, in fact, as it's known in Hebrew, being taken to the Western Wall by the ultra-Orthodox rabbi in charge of the location. And clearly he's been asked to look at text as such, explaining the importance of the wall. What is also very interesting for viewers is the fact that he's actually standing with his wife, because men and women are actually separated in front of the wall.
Do you remember how angry most of you got when you saw those pictures of Donald Trump at the Wailing Wall? He's not a puppet for the Zionists. There are no Zionists. Remember, folks, there's just the Phoenicians. There's just those 13 families, and they're very smart, and they're very good. And he sat down with everybody in front of the camera and behind the cameras, the people that are really in power, and he laid it all out on these minions. They were balking at him, even though he showed that the Saudis had signed over, and the Israelis were balking at Trump and were not prepared to sign over. And that's why Trump stayed an extra day. Trump was not going to leave Israel without them capitulating to him.
Jerusalem, the ancient city claimed by three of the world's great religions, now central in a dispute pitting President Trump and Israel's prime minister against most world leaders. The president telling the heads of Israel, Egypt, Jordan, Saudi Arabia, and the Palestinians today he will recognize Jerusalem as Israel's capital. An unprecedented move breaking with U.S. policy since Israel was created.
And the sort of the how do you know moment is after visiting the Wailing Wall, Israel publicly submitted allowing the United States to move their embassy to Jerusalem.
But the president will not move the U.S. embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem right away, despite a campaign promise.
We will move the American embassy to the eternal capital of the Jewish people, Jerusalem.
This is symbolic. It is a symbolic act to show who has the power, even in the Holy Land.
And we extend a hand in friendship to Israel, the Palestinians, and to all of their neighbors. May there be peace. May God bless this embassy. May God bless all who serve there. And may God bless the United States of America. Thank you.
Step number 2 of the journey completed.
President Trump met with Pope Francis at the Vatican, toured St. Peter's Basilica.
Saudi, Israel, and then the Vatican.
Hi, George. Good morning from Rome. As you know, these are two leaders who don't see eye to eye on a number of issues. They had that very public feud during the campaign over immigration. But today, that first face-to-face right here at the Vatican, and they both seem to genuinely get along.
Vatican, and he presents to Pope Francis a massive, apparently the folder was absolutely huge, and handed it over to them and said, yeah, take your time, have a look-see. Apparently Trump kept making little digs at Pope Francis about his red shoes. Yeah, you might want to put your red shoes on when you look at all of this stuff. And so that's what Trump is saying. I'm not leaving here until you sign some documents for me. It took the Vatican that night, and the next day they capitulated.
When you see Pope Francis with a world leader, and he meets a lot of them, it's easy to read into it. He doesn't have much of a poker face, I guess. But here he is with German Chancellor Angela Merkel, happy. Here he is with President Putin, not too thrilled. See you with President Obama, laughing it up. And finally, here he is with the Trump. It looks less like a meeting, more like the Trump family passed away and they don't know it yet.
Donald Trump has a look on his face that is a mixture of victory, joy, and mischievousness.
And the two men who so publicly clashed, today ending their meeting in a handshake. Yeah, so there were no cameras inside for the meeting between the president and the Pope, but we are hearing a little bit about what they discussed. They talked about the situation in the Middle East. They talked about the protection of Christian communities around the world. A number of international affairs issues talked about here today.
And they symbolically signed off. Now, what did the Vatican have to do to sign off? You see, the Fed is controlled by a certain group within the Catholic Church who went forth and spread the teachings of Christianity. The Jesuits!
When is a central bank not a central bank? When is a private bank public and a public bank private? Sound mysterious and full of secrets? Well, that's the Vatican Bank.
It's in 1929 they hit a deal with Mussolini, the head of the fascist state. He recognized them as a real country, that little piece of land, and in return gave them about $1 billion in today's money, compensating them for the loss of the Papal States. They said, what do we do with $1 billion? We're clerics, not financiers. They hired a guy who was a brilliant financial whiz, Bernardino Nogaro. He came in. He understood arbitrage, he understood offshore banking, he understood how to move hard assets around, investments in real estate, and he started to do that. In the middle of World War II, he said to the Pope, I need a bank. It's not enough to have correspondent banks. We need to move our money off the radar so the British and Americans can't follow what we're doing, because they were playing both sides. The Americans and Brits they were investing in, and the Germans and Italians. They didn't know who would win. They wanted to make sure they were covered. And that's the birth of the Vatican Bank. They go from an institution that can't embrace capitalism to one that suddenly has its own bank in the middle of the war.
They were in control of the Fed. So Trump did not leave until Pope Francis issued a papal bull announcing that by a certain date, the Vatican Bank, which was in charge of all, was the head executor, the exchequer of all of the earth-wide Federal Reserve banking systems in each country, would be handed over to one Donald J. Trump. Donald J. Trump is not, Mark, just the executor, the exchequer of the U.S. Treasury and therefore the Fed within the United States. He is the exchequer for Earth. He is the exchequer for the treasuries for every single country on earth. That's what I told you earlier. No human being in history has ever been more powerful, owned more things, or richer than Donald Trump.
And we are working on that as we speak. We have conversations with various representatives of China. I believe that will all work out very well for everybody. China, Japan, the United States, and everybody in the region. As far as the currency devaluations, I've been complaining about that for a long time. And I believe that we will all eventually, and probably very much sooner than a lot of people understand or think, we will be all on a level playing field. Because that's the only way it's fair. That's the only way that you can fairly compete in trade and other things. and we will be on that field, and we will all be working very hard to do great for our country. But it has to be fair, and we will make it fair.
London was the financial arm of all of this. Washington was the military arm. Rome was the central brain, the core. They call it the spirit, but it's not. It's sort of the central brain of this unholy trinity of power. And what they did by doing this is that so Trump's thinking is like the CIA, the Rothschilds, and the financial district of the city of London is too evil. It's too far gone. Don't even want to work with them. And he's not. He circumvented them.
Its patriarch during the second half of the 20th century was Sir Evelyn Rothschild, who even today is the financial advisor to Queen Elizabeth.
All of their power was cut off, and they have been forced to do some really humbling things over the last 18 months in particular. By POTUS. Now, when Trump left Rome, he flew directly to Brussels,
a city he previously called a hellhole. Can he and NATO's European members agree on who their real enemies are? And on International Missing Children's Day, we learn what can be done to both find and prevent losing children.
And you all know the two big players that are in Brussels. You have this European Parliamentary for the EU, and then you also have NATO that just happens to be in Brussels as well. They were all there, all of the political heads, along with their finance ministers, and then all of the behind-the-scenes individual players were all there for this. And Trump apparently very famously, he called everyone together for this meeting, and then he purposely came late.
Well, it's difficult to predict or to interpret how they're feeling, but it's basically been a meeting, not a summit, that has been surrounded by a lot of anxiety from all in Brussels and also from European capitals.
And he made them just sweat it out. He made these pieces of dung in Brussels sweat it out. So Trump makes the wait, he walks in late, he throws this big folder on the table, and he said, "We have it all. We have it all." And in short order, those little rats, those little cowards, they all capitulated in very, very short order. And there was a whole bunch of things that occurred in the following days from there, including the EU backing down on Brexit.
No more financial contributions, no more European Court of Justice, no more common fisheries policy, no more being talked down to, no more being bullied, no more Guy Verhofstadt. I mean, what's not to like? I know you're going to miss us. I know you want to ban our national flags, but we're going to wave you goodbye, and we'll look forward in the future to working with you as sovereign.
If you disobey the rules, you get cut off. Could we please remove the flags?
And NATO having to, step up and basically pay for the bulk, and all of these different nations instead of the United States having to fund all of them.
He plans to tell other members to spend more on defence and step up the fight against terrorism.
I have been very, very direct with Secretary Stoltenberg and members of the alliance in saying that NATO members must finally contribute their fair share and meet their financial obligations. But 23 of the 28 member nations are still not paying what they should be paying, and what they are supposed to be paying for their defense.